Hi, my name is Paul Greenberg. I'm a language enthusiast from Toronto on an amazing journey with Anishinaabemowin.
Hi, I'm Isadore Toulouse, also known as Niswe in my Anishinaabe name, which means three crows. And I am a specialist in Anishinaabemowin for the last 40 years.
We decided to create Paul and Isadore Living Anishinaabemowin to share our ongoing dialogue about and in the language with you all. We release episodes regularly and we hope that you enjoy watching it as much as we enjoy making it. If you think that what we are doing is worthwhile and should be seen by others, please hit the like button below. That's how we get seen. And if you want to stay up to date with all of the exciting things we have in store, please be sure to subscribe below. Make sure to turn notifications on so that you will know when we upload a new episode. Kachimikwech. Okay, hello. Welcome to episode 2 of Paul and Isadore Living Anishinaabemowin. Isadore, good to see you.
Good to see you, Paul.
So you're not in Canada.
I am not. I am in the United States of America.
Nice. Well, the good news about technology these days is we can do this from anywhere.
That's right.
And I'll tell you, if we didn't do it this week, I would have definitely missed you. So let's get into it. So what we're going to do today is the same format. We'll start with some questions for each other.
Mm-hmm.
We'll do the in the language with our ongoing discussion with Bev up in Wikwemikong.
Right.
And then we'll do fun with words. And I've got some interesting things I'd like to talk to you about today related to numbers. So we'll get into that. So let's start with the questions. I'm actually going to pull this up. So the first question for you is kind of a heavy one. This actually came out of our last discussion, Isadore, and you made an interesting comment that stuck with me, which was I think were talking about your experiences as a teacher, and you were saying that early on, you found that it was white people who tended to kind of show more interest in the language. And that kind of stuck with me for a few days. And I was starting to recall things that I've heard along my journey and even some people that I've met talking about this thing that sometimes happens with people who are Anishinaabeg, feeling a sense of trauma, which can prevent them sometimes from being able to comfortably re-engage with and reclaim the language. So I wanted to just ask you about that and maybe first talk a little bit about, from your understanding, why that happens, because not everyone is fully aware of this background. And then what I'm really interested to know is, as an educator, bringing the language back to Anishinaabeg in particular, how do you deal with that? How do you overcome that? What are some of the things that sort of you do or try to keep in mind as you proceed, in that kind of delicate situation?
Mm-hmm. Well, I remember back in my earlier days, grade one, we had nuns as teachers, and the nuns would literally hit us with a ruler, with a Bible, with whatever they had with them if we spoke the language. If we did not understand, we did not know English. So we answered back in Anishinaabe, and poof, next thing you know, you get hit in the head. And then you're made to kneel on a cement block with your pants rolled up, so your bare knees on the cement block on the corner, saying your Hail Marys or whatever. And those are traumatizing events that we as children endured. And for the most part, our parents probably had endured when they went to residential school, our grandparents. So the loss of language that happened during those early years from our parents, our grandparents, those that lost it. Fortunately, my grandparents didn't lose the language. My parents didn't lose the language. They had they had a belief in it that there was something in there. So those that had lost it were, I would say, traumatized, like you said, traumatized to try and relearn something back that was punished, that they were punished for. is a really hard thing for people to do again.
Mhm.
It's because the the emotions that they felt back then slowly um, come back come back to them.
Mhm.
And so what I try and tell people that are trying to learn the language to be able to speak to their elders in their community and listen to their stories as to what had happened.
Mhm.
Get the elders to try and encourage you to help you retain some of that knowledge that you have. If you were a speaker when you were a child and you lost it during that time, that that memory, that language that you have still is inside you. It
Mhm.
just needs to come out somehow
Mhm.
because you had that language in the beginning. You spoke the language when you first came into this world. That was the first language that was spoken.
Mhm.
So that language, that memory of that language that you have, is still in the back of your brain somewhere. It just needs different triggering effects to help bring it out. And the whole idea of speaking to different elders or speaking to your grandparents or family members, just listening to what they had endured. Maybe they didn't endure anything. Maybe they just didn't um, want to learn the language. But
Mhm.
a lot of people didn't learn the language because of what their parents or their grandparents told them, that we were protecting you because you needed to learn English.
Mhm.
We were protecting you from what we had endured, so we didn't teach you the language. Though they spoke it fluently, and the children weren't taught the language,
Mhm.
and the children are being resentful to the parents now because they didn't teach them.
Mhm.
But that was the whole idea, the whole essence behind parents not teaching their kids because they were protecting them,
Mhm.
that they would rather have them learn English because of the trauma that the parents, grandparents endured
Mhm.
speaking their
Yeah.
language.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really one of the things that I heard and what you described is kind of the power of community and the power, as you said, of connecting with elders who can provide both guidance and support and in a way a sense of security to kind of come back to the language.
Right, right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. This is some, as I said, it's something that was definitely on my mind. I have encountered people who've sort of described this.
Hmm.
I can't even imagine sort of what that's like to have that type of relationship with your own language. That's been sort of through an outside source created this kind of tension and trauma. But if there's ways that we can help even a tiny little bit to sort of open that door, that would be incredible. So, all right. So I'm going to go to the next question, which was one for me.
Yeah, this is a question that I have for you, Paul. So,
Mhm.
what is different about an oral language? What is different about learning an oral language?
Yeah. So this actually is something that came to me relatively recently, and when particularly when I've kind of been learning a language that's really difficult, that has almost sort of insurmountable things that you come up against. Invariably, what happens is you realize that trying to get over that hill in the same way or in some sort of tried and true way may not be the way to do it, and maybe you have to sort of take a different tack. And that happened with Anishinaabemowin, which is that there is a writing system, but it's Roman letters. It's not something that was created by Anishinaabeg. It was created, if I understand correctly, by missionaries who were trying to have a tool for them to understand the language and them to sort of engage with the language. So it's not something that sort of came from inside. And I know that even today, there are differences in opinion about what spelling system you should use and what writing system you can use. And, even when you hear people talk, even from sometimes house to house, but certainly town to town or location to location, there's different words and different ways of pronouncing words. And, I often hear people, having conversations like, well, my grandmother said it this way. And another person's like, well, my grandmother said it that way, and these types of things. And so when you're trying to kind of quickly get up to speed, the first reaction I had was it was infuriating. It was like, no one spells stuff the same way. No one says anything the same way. Like, how am I going to learn this stuff, right? And I was trying to be like, why can't they just have like one fixed system where it's all the same? And, I could just get my head around it. And I just came to this realization. I was like, hold on a second. This is an oral language. It wasn't ever written. It wasn't meant to be written. So rather than trying to sort of engage with it through written form, maybe I should start to focus on something else, which is really start to listen more, focus on the sounds more. And then the other thing I also started to do is be like, okay, rather than getting angry and infuriated when stuff is spelled differently, maybe I should approach it like a game, like a little code. Like if I can be like, oh, okay, so Mino, M-I-N-O, meaning good, is spelled that way here, but then this person spells it Mina, M-I-N-A. And I'm like breaking the code. I'm like, oh, that's the same thing. And it starts to become almost like a fun game. I also notice it, by the way, when I'm writing texts, because the first way that I learned how to write morning was K-I-Z-H-E-P, Kizhep. And so I always have this dilemma when someone writes to me, like in Facebook, and they write K-I-Z-H-E-B. And I'm like, okay, am I going to be a jerk if I write it with a P? Because it's almost like I'm correcting them. So should I just adjust to what they wrote, or should I write the way I'm supposed to write it? And I just realized, what, I need to just step away from the written form and just engage it as an oral language and not get too fussed with these differences. So that's the first thing.
Right.
But then I started to think about, okay, so what are the implications of this? If you don't have written history, clearly, when you look in the language, you can see how advanced the culture is and was when it comes to science, when it comes to society, when it comes to agriculture, when it comes to everything, right? So clearly, vast amounts of information are being passed from generation to generation. And it's not written down. So if it's not written down, it's got to be somewhere. And the answer is it's here, right? So when you are in an oral tradition, there's a memory muscle that you develop, which far, far supersedes anything that we have with the written language. So that's kind of interesting, And just as like a tiny, tiny little micro example, I was actually thinking about this the other day, is that I was thinking back when I was 10 or 11, we didn't have mobile phones. We didn't have computers. So I easily had 20, 25 phone numbers memorized, I have a mobile phone. I don't think I could even remember my own phone number now, let alone someone else's, right?
Right.
And so it's just an example of like, if you don't develop that memory muscle and you sort of outsource it to something else, you're actually losing something inside yourself. And so this memory muscle is almost a gift of oral languages. I think is really interesting. The second is when you're not tied to the words on a page being fixed, it actually creates something that I perceive, and I'm just at the beginning, so I may be wrong about this, but a sense of liberation, flexibility, fluidity of the language, the ability to sort of bend pronunciations and do things with words that, someone can't go back and say, well, it's written this way here, so you can't say it that way, And it opens up a level of sort of improvisational expression that I kind of liken almost to jazz improvisation. And I was telling you earlier, just based on my experience with music, is that compared to, for instance, the traditional classical music tradition, where you really are bound by the notes on the page, when you start to improvise in jazz, you can bend notes, you can go places that are outside the bounds or the limitations of what's written down. And I think the same kind of thing I perceive, and I'm still at the beginning of this, but I just suspect, based on things that I see, there's a similar level of kind of improvisational freedom in the language when it's oral. So these are just some things that I've noted. I may come back later and have, a sort of a slightly different perspective. At least that's where I am at the moment.
Right.
Okay. So I was thinking, we're now in the language, and I actually gave some advice, and I decided to take my own advice. So last week, I was answering the question of tips for language learners. And one of the things I said is you need to identify achievable and relevant objectives. So you have something really focused to kind of draw your attention to and have high motivation with. And it actually came to me, and it's like a lightning bolt this week, that this is my achievable objective. This is what I want to do. I want to be able to have a non-trivial conversation with Bev. So I'm talking not just basic greetings, but an actual conversation. So, and that's the first step. Obviously, if I achieve that, there's so many things that come out of that, so many things that get implied. But that's the thing I have in my sights right now that I want to get to. So with that, let's get to our conversation with Bev. So
Sure.
I thought what I would do is, before just jumping into her recordings, is give a little bit of a visual so people have an image of who this Bev person is and where she lives, and what my experience with her was. So the map here is showing the drive that I took when I went north from Toronto up to Wikwemikong, which is on Manitoulin Island. And then the video on the left is basically a 360 video that I took when I arrived on her farm. That's actually her house, and that plastic on the windows there, that was actually my first job. So I think I may have told you that the deal was I help around the farm. She speaks Anishinaabemowin to me. And the first thing, I literally got out of my car and I was already stapling up plastic on the windows because snow was coming. But it was amazing. It was the most beautiful, beautiful place. There were lots of people helping out on the farm. And it was so awesome that I walked and literally I didn't hear English. Like everyone was speaking Anishinaabemowin. It was like I had entered some other realm or something. It was magical. Really, really amazing. So that's Bev's farm. This is Bev. And I told you this earlier, that when I got there the first night, she was actually, she was making something out of leather for one of her relatives. And while she was doing that, unbeknownst to me, she actually, well, this was known to me, she measured my feet, but I didn't know why. And then a little later, she had these two things on the table cut out in the pattern of my feet. And she said, "This is what you're making this week." So basically, while she would be doing stuff in the evening after our days, I would be sitting at that table right there sewing. And it took me a week, but eventually I made these, makazinan. So can you actually say the words? And I don't know if there's anything you can say about the words, but at least I want to hear you say them.
Oh, sure. The word mikizin is a shoe, and mikizinan is shoes, and that comes from the English language took that word into moccasins. So in English, it's moccasins. So it's really makizin, moccasin, mikizin, mikizinan, moccasins.
So, and mikazin, is that describing, like in English, as you know, when we say moccasins, we think of this, right? These handmade leather shoes. Is that what mikazin is? Or is mikazin more broadly any type of shoe or boot, or how does that work?
Well, you stumped me. I don't really know where that actual mikizin comes from.
Okay.
That'd be my next research project.
Okay, awesome. And listen, we like research here. We find stuff we don't know, we'll bring it back in another episode.
Right.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to keep going. So this is her place, and as you can see, it was a good idea that we put up the plastic because the next day a lot of snow came. It was stunningly beautiful. I'm going to ask you to talk to me about these words. So, can you see those words?
I don't see any words.
You don't see on the left-hand side where it says Zogpwa and Gon?
Oh no, there's a blue thing on my computer that I need to fix.
Oh, okay.
It's Microsoft Store. I don't know how to remove it. So okay. It's behind there. So okay. Anyway.
So I'll tell you what I have on the screen. So I have Zogpwa, which is equals, at least what I did is be snowing or to be snowing. So it's actually a verb. And then I have Gon, which is fallen snow, which I guess is a noun. So yeah, just talk to me about those words.
Okay. Now the word Zogpwa would be the action that takes place. So as in Gemewan, Menagishgat, Ksina, Zogpwa. It is snowing. And then we have goon. Goon is the actual object, the substance that is on the ground. Goon. Goon ka, if we said goon ka, that means there's lots of snow. Goon ka. So goon is the actual snow, the actual object. Goon.
Okay. Okay. Can you use zokpwa in a sentence? And by the way, and speak slowly.
Mampi mzinates jigning maba debatang ejweba kujing we zokwa gikeda wabang kijeb.
Okay.
We zokwa gikeda wabang kijeb.
Okay.
It's a start. Did you understand? Maba mampi mzinates jigning debatang ejweba kujing gikeda we zokwa wabang gikeda.
Okay. So I know Wabang Kejep is that tomorrow morning?
Tomorrow morning, yeah.
Tomorrow morning, right? And the thing I wasn't sure about is the gi keda, because I thought keda or kedat usually is like a message or saying something.
Right. Kida, gi kida means he or she said.
Said, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to guess.
And
oh,
then
sorry.
Mzinates jigan is the television. So the person that is on television
Said
that announces the weather, he said it's going to snow tomorrow.
Okay, perfect. Wonderful. Okay, so can you see these words on your screen?
I can see, yes. Mitig.
Okay, so what I was just going to briefly give you some context is this was one of the many walks that Beverly's son took me on, and he took me into this maple forest where they actually have a little hut there, which is where they cook the sap in the spring to make maple syrup in that building. So anyway, over to you with the words.
All right, so we have mitig. Mitig. Mitig is a tree. And then a specific tree would be a ninatig. Ninatig. That would be the maple tree. Ninatig. Mitigwabu would be the sap that comes from that tree. Wabu. Abu is a liquid. Okay? Abu. Mitigabu. Mitigawabu. Ninatigwabu would be the maple sap. Ninatigwabu. And this one is the mitigwabu. That's the actual first part of that drip tree.
So let me ask you, how do you say soup?
Mbub.
Okay. How do you say tea?
Nibi shabu.
Okay, so there's abo, right?
There's the abo.
And nibish?
Nibish would be the leaf liquid.
So the water, right?
Nibish shabu, that would be tea.
Tea. But the nibish is?
No, those are two different words.
Okay. So,
Nibish would be the leaf. Nbish would be water. It has nothing to do with the other.
Perfect.
Two different words.
Awesome. Okay, so mbish is water.
Mbish is water.
And nibish is leaf.
Nibish is leaf, right.
And then you put it together, nibish abo is basically leaf liquid. So tea.
Leaf liquid, right.
Awesome.
So tea is a leaf liquid.
Perfect. Okay. So this is Beverly's dining room. And this is the most amazing place because as you can see here, I don't think I ever saw fewer than 4 or 5 people there. There's constantly people coming and going. She's always feeding people. This was for breakfast. So Beverly is there. Her husband, I think, do you know him? Is it Louis, his name?
Yeah, Louis.
Louis, right? And then her sister Pat in the red. And then Uncle Bernard here on the bottom right. And then I don't remember this guy's name. I don't know if you know.
This is their younger brother, Joey.
Joey, okay. All right, so they're there for breakfast. So let's actually look at some words. So tell me about this word.
This one is dopwin, which is a table. Dopwin.
Okay.
Pubwin, chair. Pubwin.
Okay.
Ziogmide would be the maple syrup. Ziogmide.
Okay.
Que is woman. kwe, nene, man, nene.
Okay, so I have a question. One of the things that I've learned is whenever I see a big word, I typically ask about it because I assume there's something inside it that may be of interest. So is there anything interesting you could tell me about Ziwagmede?
Ziogmede, it has a Z1 has a bittersweet taste to it. Zio, zio, ziobu could be vinegar.
Oh, okay.
Ziobu.
Okay.
Ziogmede would be the oily part of that maple sugar, like it runs like oil.
Yeah. Okay.
Ziogmede.
Fantastic. Okay, and then a couple of words that I am familiar with. So let's look at nene. So how would you say a medicine man?
Mishkiki nene. Mishkiki nene.
Okay, mishkiki is?
Mishkiki is medicine. Perfect.
What about a policeman?
That would be a tkunwe. I guess to be correct, politically correct, you would need to use et kunwed, because a long time ago we used to use the words for policemen kunwe nene. Now we have police women. It's no longer tkune nini kwe because they're not men women.
Right.
It should just be tkunwe kwe. But in general, it would be et kunwed, the police officer. Et kunwed.
Got it.
So that distinction with the male female should not even be in that word, because there's male and female officers. There's male and female everything these days. So because the male was a hierarchy, paternalistic Kidwin word back in the day, and women were classified as a lower standard. The word kunwe nini kwe became for a policewoman.
Got it.
So, and then I'm thinking, why is there a man? The word man in there? You shouldn't say kunwe nini kwe, because there's no way that policewoman is nowhere near a man. So the word man should not even be in there. It should just be tkunwe kwe or udawe kwe, meaning the store lady. Kinumage kwe, the teacher woman, or e kinumaged, e udawed, e tkunwed.
Got it. So just taking the gender out of it.
Just taking the gender out of it, right?
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Okay, so now we're going to get to our discussion with Beverly. So what I'm going to do, this is the message that you and I agreed I was going to send to Beverly last week. I'm going to play that now, and this is my best shot, and you can read along with the Anishinaabemowin there at the top.
Ani bev, zinda gachi odenang, gwetani minagizigad gewi. Wenish ga jinagzawad, gados kanak. Ani dash ingodiba gisoan, sheapta, enji medabangoyin, winanad mbistigan. Gawi nabesi, mbistigan ode andis.
So as you can see, Imbishigan is a very difficult word for me to say, but I will keep practicing it. So what I basically said to her, as you can see here, is hello, Bev. It's a really beautiful day here in Toronto too. How did your scones turn out? Why did you have to travel 1.5 hours to get yeast? Don't they have yeast in Andes? So she didn't respond specifically to those questions, but she did send back some really nice messages. So let's look at this. So the first one I just want to point out is the pictures, the top 2 pictures she sent me of the scone that she made. And then the bottom one is actually the bread that she talks about in this message. So first, we'll do what we did last time. We'll listen to her message up front. You can follow along with the Anishinaabemowin there. Then we'll talk about the words that she uses, and we'll listen to it again to consolidate the understanding.
Mandashke Nige manda awan ni bindap ke benegan. Ni bindap ke benan manda ni jabomnas mami ni kenga nakadama. Zam ni bena ginchu kudaning kajiwakong webjong. Eko ni shramegi. Aha, mama.
Okay, so here's the cool thing about these discussions with you, Isadore, is that I start to see, I'm not at the point yet where I can say that I fully grasp full entire sentences, but I'm definitely seeing words start to reappear and recognizing them. So let's talk through this. So let's, what I want to do is give you an opportunity to speak more than me on this, because that's where the learning happens. So maybe you can just talk through that first sentence and just word by word what's going on here.
So mandash gei ni gei manda awan. So she's more or less repeating her first part into the second part. Mandash gei, and this here, or this thing, mandash gei ni gei manda, and then she's repeating that again. And this thing gei, and also this awan, this is awan, awan meaning it is. Ni bindap kiebnigan, ni, so that what it is, bindap kiebnigan, is what is thrown into the oven. Bindap kiebnigan.
Okay.
So that is what we call that bread. It could be anything that you bindap kiebnan, but that's specifically that bread. Bindap kiebnigan.
Okay, so I have a few questions. I noticed that in her previous message, she also had ni-ish, she had ni-ing, and now she has ni-i. It seems like it's all sort of talking about like this thing or this place or this, right? And then I want to ask you, so I understood the awan, but can you break down bindapke ibingan? Like what's in that word? What are some of the pieces of it?
Bindap kiebnigan. Bean is something like beanje, inside. Beanje. Beaned again. You know the word beaned again come in? Beaned again. So it's the same beginning.
Okay.
The root be, bean. Bindap kie, meaning it is something that is thrown into.
Okay.
Bindap kiebnigan. And the gun is the object. Bindap kiebnigan.
Okay. All right, cool. So then let's go to the next sentence.
Gibindap kiebenan. So this is where she's saying, I threw it in. I put it in. Gibindap kiebenan.
Oh,
It doesn't really say she put it in the oven, but we know that's what it means. Gibindap kiebenan, meaning I put it in.
So in this case, we have that same word, the bindapke ebinan, but the ngi at the beginning, just to make sure anyone who's listening is clear, specifically the gi, the gii is what makes it past tense.
Right.
And the n at the beginning, the n is what makes it me, I.
That makes it personable for me, yes.
Right.
Gibindap kiebenan.
Okay, so let's go on in the sentence.
Gibindap kiebenan manda ni, again, there's that ni again. That it is. Jibwa mnazma. Jibwa is before.
Yeah.
Jibwa mnazma. Before I cooked it, mina keing ga nakdama. This is how I cut it up. Ga nakdama. So meaning this last picture that you have here, the third picture, is where she sliced the bread so it bakes like that. So when it rises, it's easier to break up for the number of people that she had to feed.
Okay, and so in that case, that ga is also past tense, right?
Ga is past tense, yes.
Also, same thing. Okay. All right, and then zam nibana.
Zam nibna is there were too many people. Zam nibna. Zam nibna, well, not yet. Zam nibna is too much. Zam nibna, too much.
As
Zam
like,
nibna.
what about zam and nibana? If you separate them, what do they mean?
Zam is because.
Got it. Okay.
Nibna is a lot.
Okay.
If I said Nibna Junya, lots of money.
Mhm.
Okay. Zam gjate, because it's hot.
Got
Zam gjate.
it. Okay. So then.
Gin chuok, meaning there were many people.
Mhm.
Gin chuok. Zam nibna gin chuok.
Mhm. Okay.
Ude niing gaji bakweang. So ude, meaning over there. Ude. Niing, at that location.
Mhm.
Gaji bakweang, where we cooked. Gaji bakweang. Webjuang, meaning Little Current, the town of Little Current. Webjuang.
Mhm.
Anishinaabeg, meaning two Sundays ago. Anishinaabeg.
Okay. So what's really cool here is we're starting to see words that come back and we recognize. So we've definitely seen ode many times. In her last message to me, she had niing. The ga past tense jibakweyang. So I have a question. How do you say kitchen?
Jibakwe gamig.
Okay, and that gamig is something we had in the last episode, right?
Right.
Okay.
Gamig makes it a building or a room.
Okay, so jibakwe gamig. And then the webijiong, so you're saying that's Little Current, right?
Yes, webjung means how the river flows. It flows fast. Webjun.
Mhm.
Webjun, meaning it's fast flowing river.
Got it.
Web.
Okay. And then the ekonish aname gijigak. There's a lot of stuff I think we've seen in here. So we're going to talk about numbers today. So that niche, I believe, is niche, right? So 2.
Yeah.
And then last time, I think we actually had aname gamig. We talked about,
Yes,
which is
and
the
the
church,
Megamig would be the church.
right? So aname gijigak. So tell me about that.
And the Megijguk would be the word Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And the Megijguk.
Mm-hmm.
So Eko, meaning the past, the last 2 Sundays. Eko Nij and the Megijguk.
So 2 Sundays ago.
Right, 2 Sundays ago.
Perfect. Okay, and we're gonna. I have some thoughts of we should do at least in an episode the days of the week. We can do time. There's a bunch of things that will come back. We can do that later. And then we had Nahal Bama last time as well, right?
Right.
So okay, later. Okay, so let's play it again.
Mandashke nige manda awan ni pindap ke benegan. Pindap ke benan manda ni jabomnas mami ni kenga nokadama. Zam ni bena gichu kudening pajiwakong webjung. Ekonish megishgok. Aha, mama.
Okay, super cool. Super cool. I can't tell you how exciting this is. Okay, there was another message that she sent. She actually sent me 7 messages, but we're only picking 2. But this one really touched me. So I'm gonna play it first, and then we can talk about it.
Hey, Paul, rijntje daar. We diskinten maar als je wie moosjen. Apjoon gi mami kwentam we Anishinaabem to yet. Apjoon gi mami kwentam. Aha, bama.
Okay, so this one she was writing after receiving the message that I sent to her. My attempt to record and speak Anishinaabemowin. So can you talk to me about this one? Let's go from the beginning.
Okay, so she's saying, hello, Paul. Ani Paul. Gawin Jeddah. Now, I don't know why she is saying I'm sorry in this one. Gawin Jeddah. Wede shkintam. Wede means that section, that segment, that part. Wede shkintam. That first part. Gajibi mojiyin. That you sent me. Gajibi mojiyin. Okay? So she's telling you that first part that you sent me. Apjugun gimami kwendam. Apje is used as very much so, like exciting, very much so. Apjugun gimami kwendam. Meaning I was so excited. We Anishinaabemowin. That you had spoken the language. we gi Anishinaabemowin. Eh, up jigo na gi mami kwendam. So she's reiterating to the fact that she was excited, overwhelmed. Eh, up jigo na gi mami kwendam. And she continues to say, yes, I was very excited, overwhelmed.
Mhm.
Now, how about B?
Okay, so I have a couple of questions here. We had in the previous one, actually the message that I sent to her when we said, don't they have yeast over at Andy's? I used gawi si. And what I realized for people who are familiar with French, when you have a negative, you have ne pas. So ne something something pas. And this sort of functions in a similar way where you say gawi something something si. And that basically negates it. Now, in this case, it's gawi without the si, but I guess that's sort of maybe a way you can use it sometimes. So you're saying that the gawi is basically not, and the njida is basically like an excuse or a something on purpose.
Yeah,
intentional?
The njida would be unintentional.
Intentional. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and then on the wede shkintam, I'm wondering if this is just something that looks like this way or if it's actually the case. But shkintam, I noticed that a lot of times when you have shk, the shk, the beginning of a word, it has to do with young or early or at the beginning or at the start of something.
Yeah.
Like shkwa or that type of thing, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Is that correct? So that's why it's the first time? Okay, and then the ga again is the past tense, and I wrote, so the jibi mojian. Is there anything in jibi mojian like that's of interest or that?
Coming from the word jibige, jibige is to write.
Okay.
Jibi mo would be to write to him.
Okay.
Jibi mojian would be to write to me. So the whole idea of conjugating that one word, you can make hundreds of different words when you're conjugating the various endings to that word.
Got it. Okay, and then the apogee, as you were saying, is like expression of it's really very or extremely, right? And then the ingi mami kwendam. So the ingi again, there's that same thing where the n personalizes it and the gi makes it past tense. And then mami kwendam is overjoyed. Now, I want to ask you, in mami kwendam, I noticed that there's a form of word, and like the example I can think of would be like gichinendam. That sort of endam often has to do with like feelings or that sort of thing. Is there anything you can say about this word?
Thinking.
Okay.
Yes. Nendamowin would be the art of thinking.
Okay.
Dinendamowin, my thoughts.
Okay.
Dinendamowin.
Okay. And then gichinendam. Gichi is the big, right? We had that before. And then so like gichinendam is a big thought, I guess is what it means literally, but it means happy, right?
Yeah, a big happy thought. Right.
Big happy thought. Okay. And then the wigi Anishinaabemowin tuyen. And then she repeats it. Nahabampi. Okay, so let's listen to it again.
Paul, da wedes kintamao shibi motion. Apchungi mami kwentam we Anishinaabemowin. Apchurangi mami kwentam. Naha, bama.
Okay, wonderful. As I said, this message really touched me. Okay, so let's move into fun with words. So we talked about this in the last episode, and I mentioned to you that there's some really cool things that I've started to notice about numbers in Anishinaabemowin. And the basic theme that I want to kind of highlight here is that in my sort of journeys in different languages, I've noticed that different languages have certain strengths and certain weaknesses. And one of the weaknesses for sure in Western European languages for me is how they deal with numbers. It's pretty poor, and particularly when you compare it with some other languages that I've encountered. So I'm going to talk today about Japanese, something that I already thought about with this, but then I encountered Anishinaabemowin and I realized, there's something similar going on here with numbers, which makes it a very, very different thing from the Western European languages that I was already familiar with. And the point I'll just make is that whatever language you use has a massive influence on your perception of numbers and your ability to manipulate them, big time. Patterns are important. So we as humans, we're just by nature designed to look for patterns. And the reason is it minimizes cognitive overhead. The more you can understand a pattern and then use that to imagine or anticipate things, it requires less work each time for you in your brain. So you want to have patterns that really work well. And so we've kind of more or less, there's some exceptions out there in the world still, but for most of the world, we use a base 10 numbering system. And when you use a base 10, the basic presumption there is that you get 10 units. And then once you have those 10 units, you can pretty much do anything you want. Good example is the metric system, right? And language, the way we deal with numbers is the same thing. And so what is really interesting is the first thing I look for when I'm dealing with numbers in a language, I want to know what's the number after 10, because that is already going to give you a clue as to how much of a pattern that's logical that language is following, because the presumption is that the thing after 10 should be based on what came before. So 1 to 10. So let's have a look at this. Don't get overwhelmed. There's a lot of stuff on the page here, but what I'm going to do is first we're going to look at 6 languages, 6 Western languages, with English, French, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, and Dutch. So I'll just quickly count. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, which you know. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So here's the thing. This is the base 10, right? And the presumption is, and I want you to imagine that you are in grade 1 in each of these countries, or whatever grade it is that you start to learn how to count. And the teacher is like, okay, we're going to learn 10. We're going to learn how to count to 10, and then that's going to set us on a path of mathematical facility. We're gonna be awesome and be able to do arithmetic and all sorts of cool things with these numbers. So you're excited. You got these first 10 units, and now as a kid, and kids are always like 50 steps ahead, they're thinking, okay, well, so this is 10. What comes next? Well, I think the logical thing is it's going to be some combination of 10 and 1, right? That would make sense. And then the teacher is like, no, it's actually not. It's 11, and it's 11, and it's 11, which actually, that one there is a little bit of combining 10 and 1, except that it's backwards. It's actually 110, 11, as opposed to dici un. And you have 11, 11 in Dutch. And so as a kid, you can imagine, this is the moment where you sort of sink into your chair and it's like, okay, I'm not quite following this. This doesn't make any sense to me. And then I was like, okay, 12, 12, 12. I'm still trying to connect this back to the first 10 things we learned, that it's not quite working out. And then if you look carefully, you start to notice that there's some things happening where the pattern shifts, where you go in English from these irregular ones, 11 and 12, to now there's something at the end of this 13. I guess it's kind of like 10, 310, 410. In French, that transition happens later. So you get up to 16 before you start to include 10 plus something. Same thing in Italian. Spanish is a little bit earlier. But the point is there's like this irregularity, but then it's kind of bringing it back, but it's not totally clear. And then finally you get to 20, which you would presume is going to be some combination of 2 and 10. And again, these are numbers that are sort of standing on their own. So, and I'll even take it one step further, which is with Dutch, when you get to 21, where they do this really counterintuitive thing. So I'm going to say the word, which is 21. And if you look at it, it's 1 en 20, which basically means 1 en 20. So totally counterintuitive. So now I'm a kid and I'm thinking, what happened to base 10? What's the frickin' pattern here? You want me to start to do base 10 arithmetic with this? Are you kidding me? And what I did a little research. It turns out that the reason for this is that European languages had what's called not a decimal system, but a vigesimal system. It was base 20 before. So we now have this confusing hybrid where we're actually using numbers that are base 20, but we're trying to do math that's base 10, which to me, as you know, I was telling you earlier, it's kind of like trying to play hockey with speed skates or trying to speed skate with hockey skates. You can do it, but it's definitely not the most efficient way. And I also put a broom in there because I was reminded of my sister, my younger sister, used to play street hockey with me and my friends, and we put her in goal with a broom because she didn't have a stick. So you can play goalie with a broom, but I'm telling you, it's not necessarily going to get you the best results. So I want to actually switch gears here, and don't get nervous. This is actually going to be kind of cool. So I'm going to look at an example of a language that I actually think does base 10 really, really well, like really well. It's so crystal clear, and the light went off for me when I learned Japanese. It's like no wonder people have a greater facility with math because it's so much easier with this language. So let's look at the numbers. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? Those are the 10 numbers. You don't understand what I just said, and that's totally fine. But I'm going to ask you, and this is going to make you maybe feel like you're on the spot, but we're going to do a little experiment here. If I said to you, this is all you got, right? You're in grade 1 again. This is all you got, and I want you to guess what you think 11 is in Japanese, just based on the information that's on this page. And don't worry about, like, this is not a test of whether you know Japanese. It's about just what would you logically assume 11 might be.
I would logically assume 10 and 1.
So say it by reading what's on the page.
Well, I can't see from 6 down.
Okay.
My screen.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you that 10 is Ju.
So Ju ichi.
Okay. What do you think that 20 would be? And I'm going to tell you that, again, 10 is Ju.
20 would be Ju. Wow.
No. This I'm going to help you out here, but there's a weird echo. Hopefully this is okay. So what I'm going to tell you is this: 20 you would logically think would be 2 10s, right?
Right.
So how would you say that? And again, I'm going to tell you that 10 is Ju.
Ni Ju.
Okay, we're making some progress here. Tell me what you think 21 might be. And again, 10 is Ju.
Ni Ju ichi.
Okay, you speak Japanese. Let's have a look at this. So there is 11, Ju ichi. There is 20, Niju. There's 21, Niju ichi, right? Totally logical, right? No irregularities, no weird stuff with base 20. It's like pristine, super clear.
Right.
Okay. And I also want to tell you that this extends, like literally you have those first 10 numbers, you can pretty much produce any number in Japanese without any exceptions, without any irregularities, without any weirdness, and immediately get into understanding how these numbers relate to each other. So let's now look at Anishinaabemowin. So I want to ask you to read this for me.
All right. Bejig, Nish, Swe, Niwin, Nanan, Ngudwaswe, Nijwaswe, Shwaswe, Jangswe, Ndaswe.
Okay, so you know the answers to these, but what we're going to do as a little test is just play out the thought experiment, okay? So if you were to give these numbers to a kid and you were to say to a kid, okay, what's 11, what's 20, and what's 21? I think the logical thing is to assume, as you did with Japanese, that 11 is going to be some combination of 10 and 1, right? And that 20 is going to be some combination of 2 and 10.
Right.
And that 21 is going to be some combination of 2 and 10 plus 1, right? Totally logical. So let's test that theory out. And lo and behold, how do you say 11?
Ndaswe Shibejig.
Okay, and so that shi, which we see going all the way through, just means and, right? So it's pulling them together. And then, so this is interesting. So the tana just becomes a simple marker to express a group of 10. So if you could say those two numbers. Oh, you can't see it. You can't see it, right? Okay. So I'll have to do this justice. Well, sorry, you know how to say 20, right?
Yeah, Nishtana.
Nishtana. And then 21?
Nishtana Shebejig.
Exactly. So this passes the test of 11 totally follows the pattern. All you need is 1 to 10. Now you can construct 11, that the 20 is some combination of the 2, the nij, which clearly shows up there, and the 10, and then the 2 10s and a 1. Nij tana shibejik. Very, very logical. All right, so we're going to use these patterns to guess what 91 might be. And again, this is the point, because as a child, although teachers like to say, this is all we're learning today, we only did 1 in 10, I guarantee you every kid is like, okay, well, if that's 1 to 10, what's 159? You know, they're clearly always thinking and asking questions, although we do a very good job of beating those questions out of them in school. But the point is that if you were to take this further and say, okay, well, in English, 91, okay, it's kind of there. And, you know, we know that that T sort of is 10, but it doesn't, you know, certainly if you're first learning this, it's not going to be immediately obvious to us. But here's a perfect example of the vestige of that base 20 system. I don't know if you can read that or understand that, but in French, the way you say 91 is 91, which literally means 4 20s and 11. And I'm telling you, that's a head scratcher. If you're a kid and you're trying to like think base 10, it's like, what? Are you kidding me? Right? So, you know, this is, again, this example of like, we've got base 20 numbers, but don't worry about it. It's base 20. We're going to do base 10. It's all going to be good. Right? And then again, this weird thing that happens in Dutch where it becomes 1 en 90, which is basically 1 and 90, which is completely counterintuitive because you're thinking 90 plus 1, but in your head, you've got to do this cognitive gymnastics and to sort of get just past this, and then on top of it, be expected to do arithmetic is a big ask, you know, compared to what we saw with Japanese. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back to our beautiful base 10 numbering systems, Japanese Anishinaabemowin, and we're going to do the same trick and see if we can figure out what 91 is. So tell me what you think 91 is in Japanese. And I guess you can't see this. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a clue, which is 9 is Q and 10 is Ju.
So
So we want to do 9, so 9 10s and a 1. So 9 is Q, 10 is Ju,
Ichi.
I'm telling you, you speak Japanese. You're awesome. You should have told me you spoke Japanese.
And you're
No
funny.
fair. You're cheating. Okay. Now, if we apply the same logic to Anishinaabemowin, I'm going to assume as a kid, 91 has got to be something with like the zhang sui. We already saw that 20 is nijtana. So I'm going to guess, to be like full disclosure, I obviously know what it is, but I'm just going to play out the role here. So I'm going to guess that it's like something with like zhang shui tana shibejik, right? So
Yes.
the 9 10s and a 1. So
Right.
we look at it, and lo and behold, there it is. Now we have, as we're going to see in a moment, the MI in the middle, which is just to connect the sound, but it's basically zhang sui, mitana, shibejik. Super clear, super clear. No base 20 nonsense going in there, no turning things backwards like Dutch. Really, really clear, really easy to understand, really easy to get your head around. So what I want to do is now say, okay, let's extend the pattern and just get a sense of where we can go with this. Can you read these numbers? And I realize you're probably going to have to, maybe I'm going to need to help you. How far can you see on this?
I can see up to 60.
Okay, can you do 60 and then I'll do 70 and beyond?
Yeah, but I know them anyway.
Okay, go ahead.
Nishtana,
Yeah.
Simdana,
Mm-hmm.
Nimdana,
Mm-hmm.
Nanmidna,
Mm-hmm.
Ngudwasmidna,
Mm-hmm.
Nijwasmidna,
Mm-hmm.
Shwasmidna,
Mm-hmm.
Zhangsimdina,
Mm-hmm.
and Ngudwak.
Okay, and then I also have, just to sort of see how the pattern extends, 101.
Ngudwak Shibejik.
Okay, so now we introduce some new things in here. So we have, I don't know if you can see this, but that walk becomes a marker to express a group of 100, which we're going to see on the next slide, how that sort of goes as a pattern.
Right.
The other thing I thought we could just do is take a little bit of a moment to talk about the ngod, because that actually shows up in a lot of words. And this is actually in my last message to Beverly, we had this word, 1.5 hours, and you can
Right.
see at the beginning the ngod di bagisoan, right?
Mhm.
The di bagisoan just means a clock, right?
Right.
So ngod di bagisoan, she, the same end, she, apta, half, right? So 1.5 hours. So I want to understand if you could just talk a little bit about ngod versus basic.
All right. So this will be profound to you, I would think. The olden days, our people counted with the one hand. Basic, niche, sweat, niwin, nanan. That's it. Starting over, nunggo, nungguding, nunggo, nunggudwa swe. That nunggo is a start over of a new set of numbers. Nunggudwa swe. Niche, coming from number 2. Nijwa swe. The waswe would be just the word that added on to those 6, 7, 8, 9. Ngudwaswe, Nijwaswe, Shwaswe, Zhangswe, Ndaswe. So the Nungo tells you that it's a once over again. Bejik ni swe niwin nanan. Starting over, Nungudwaswe, Nijwaswe. Coming from Nungudwak, you're starting over a new set of numbers, 100. Nijwak, 200. Swak, 300. Niwak, 400. So, Nunggo, Nunggudbagi swad, 1 hour. Nunggo, Nunggudbagine, it is 1 o'clock. Ngudwushkin, 1 bag full. Ngudem kwan, 1 spoon. Ngudnikwajagan, 1 drink. Ngo, ngo.
Okay, Isadore,
Yes.
you just gave me my weekly goosebumps. That is so cool. And by the way, I also want to say that you're a few steps ahead. So I'm going to go to the next slide. So this is now extending even further. So
Right.
you can maybe see if you could just read those.
Nijwak,
Mm-hmm.
Nswak,
Mm-hmm.
Niwak,
Mm-hmm.
Nanwak,
Mm-hmm.
Ngudwaswak,
Mm-hmm.
Nijwaswak,
Mm-hmm.
Shwaswak,
Mm-hmm.
Zhangswak,
Mm-hmm.
and Mdaswak.
Perfect. And so the mdaswak is 10 hundredths, basically.
10 hundreds, right.
Right? Okay, and then I don't know if you can see this, but I also extended down because now I'm thinking, okay, if you got mdaswak, I guess you would say, how would you say 2,000?
Nijing Mdaswak.
Okay, so that then extends into what I've got at the bottom, which is 10,000.
10,000 would be Mdaching Mdaswak.
Exactly. So this now, as we can see, similar to Japanese, and I use that because it's a system that I know well and I definitely experienced, and it was the one that first made the light bulb go off in my head of like, wait a second, this system we've been using in English makes no sense compared to this thing. And I really felt the same sort of light bulb go off when I started to see numbers in Anishinaabemowin. So the point here is with this clear base 10 pattern, you can now make and use pretty much any number in Anishinaabemowin, or at least anticipate what it might be, which is a really, really powerful thing, especially if you think about trying to introduce numbers to someone as a youngster. Now, you already, I had this as the last thing I wanted to talk about, is I was sitting there scratching my head for a long time asking why I'm in the middle of 1 to 10. Why does it now go back to 1? The ngod, the niche. And you've actually just answered that question brilliantly and beautifully. And also the other question I had, which was the ngod versus basic. So thank you. And maybe we'll just, reiterate that this is essentially saying that 5 was the first place you count. And then when you want to go beyond that, you start with the ngod waswe beyond.
Right.
Super,
Right.
super cool. Super interesting. I want to tell you, from the very moment that I first saw that, I've been wondering this. You finally kind of opened the veil and revealed the truth. That's super, super interesting. Thank you. All right, so Isadore, we have come to the end of episode 2.
Very good.
This has been awesome, and I look forward to next time.
Alrighty. I
Okay.
really appreciate working with you, and we'll see you next week.
Okay, bamapi.
Bamapi.
If you enjoyed this video and think that others should see it, please hit the like button below. All likes help us get seen by others. And of course, be sure to subscribe so that you can stay up to date on all new episodes. Make sure to turn notifications on so that you will know when we upload a new episode. Miigwech!